Hey, everybody. Welcome. We're live here in the green room for DisrupTV. And of course, back here, as you can tell, I'm at the New York airport going live. And I've got my amazing co-host, Vala Afshar, and of course, our producer, Elle. But more importantly, we've got our guests, which we always introduce in reverse order. And our first guest in reverse order is going to be Andrew Chow. Andrew, welcome.
Hey, Ray. How's it going?
Yeah, where are you? What are we going to talk about today?
I'm in DC, and I just wrote a book. It's called Cryptomania. And it's about the rise and fall of the previous era of crypto over the pandemic, talking about how such a utopian technology was corrupted by people like Sam Bankman-Fried. Obviously, the industry has returned kind of in full force now, or maybe not so full force, but we're going to talk about all of that. So thanks so much for having me on.
No, we're excited to have you on. And as you know, the crypto market is amazing. It's actually all full force in Dubai now, which is actually changing what we see. So very, very cool. Bonnie, where are you coming from? What are we talking about today?
Hi, Ray. I'm calling from Hong Kong. So it's about 2 a.m. right now. And we're going to be talking about my book, which is called The Return on Kindness. And this is a book that's really geared towards not just leaders, but anyone who's aspiring to be a leader or who has been a leader, is currently a leader, and about how kindness is kind of the secret weapon to really amplifying all of the great stuff in your culture.
Oh, that is amazing. For those following around, check us out on X. We're going to kick off the show. I'm turning it back to Elle and Vala. Links are all available, so we're ready to go. Okay, everyone?
All right. Okay, 3, 2, 1.
Welcome. Thank you for joining us on DisrupTV. My name is Vala Afshar. I'm the Chief Digital Evangelist at Salesforce, co-host Hour. We welcome you to follow us on X at DisrupTV Show. Ray, myself, and our distinguished guests will try to answer your questions live in the next hour. It's my pleasure to introduce my co-host, Ray Wang. He's the CEO and founder of Constellation Research. He's on the road. He's the best-selling author of Everybody Wants to Rule the World. I see Ray on TV every day. Bloomberg, CNBC, Fox Business, CNN. He is, in my opinion, one of the top futurists to follow on X at RWANG0. Welcome, Ray Wang, from somewhere to DisrupTV.
Hey, thanks a lot. I'm here with my amazing co-host, Vala Afshar. He's the Chief Digital Evangelist for Salesforce, and he's also the author of multiple books, including Boundless, A New Mindset for Unlimited Business Success, and once a #1 seller on Amazon, and you should definitely check it out if you haven't bought the book. But more importantly, executives around the world pay attention to every one of his insightful and inspirational tweets, and when he's not hosting, keynoting, and leading events at Salesforce, you can find him writing his awesome articles on ZDNet, and of course, taking those notes from DisrupTV and providing those into insightful tweets and articles for everyone else to read. But it's not about us. It's about our amazing guests. And who do we have today to kick it off?
Ray, it's a privilege for us to have Dr. Bonnie Hayden Chen, author of The Return on Kindness. Dr. Cheng is an associate professor of management and MBA program director at HKU Business School, University of Hong Kong. Bonnie's work has been published in leading academic outlets such as the Academy of Management Journal, Journal of Applied Psychology, and Journal of Personality and Social Psychology. Her research is dedicated to helping employees achieve and maintain well-being in the workplace. Bonnie sits in a unique position of connecting cutting-edge research with real-world applications to develop awesome corporate cultures that drive positive change. Dr. Cheng has worked closely with companies such as AIA, Cathay Pacific, DH Global Forwarding, and UBS. Her work has been featured in leading media sources such as Harvard Business Review, Wall Street Journal, Forbes, and New York Times. Dr. Cheng is author of the new book, The Return on Kindness: How Kind Leadership Wins Talent, Earns Loyalty, and Builds Successful Companies. The book has earned incredible global recognition. It's an honor to have Dr. Cheng on DisrupTV. Welcome, Bonnie, to DisrupTV.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. Thank you. And I know it's 2 a.m., so thank you for joining us.
Yeah,
Hope I
we're
make
really
sense
excited.
at 2 a.m.
That's right.
You know, we're really excited to have you out here. And I think one of the most important things is that kindness and business aren't two words that we normally see, right? And it's not an easy thing to be able to deliver. Tell us more, really, what was the genesis of your thought behind writing this book? Because we don't see a lot of kindness in business, and it's not a normal thing.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's probably why I really wanted to write a book around kindness and leadership, because the two of them aren't really, they're not words that you hear go together often. So a little bit of context behind this book. In initial conversations I had with my publisher, Penguin Random House, they really wanted me to write, a popular press leadership book. And actually, my immediate response to that was this polite, thanks, but no thanks. Because I teach leadership, right, to MBAs, I teach leadership to executives in executive education programs, and I'm well aware of the tens of thousands of leadership books out there, right? So why on earth do we need another one? And so when I shared these thoughts with my publisher, they just smiled and they said, well, okay, think about it. If you were to write a leadership book, what would it look like? And at that time, it was, long COVID here in Hong Kong. And so I started to really think about, what's needed in leadership today that's going to not just get us through this crisis of a pandemic, but what's needed to kind of future-proof leadership, right? What's something that's going to help us, knowing that unrelenting change and uncertainty is really the new constant. And the thing is, I read a lot of these leadership books, right? I have to keep up to date with the knowledge to share it with my students. And so I've been seeing this kind of trend towards, human leadership, authentic leadership, or, positive leadership, ethical leadership, any of these terms that I'm sure we've heard of. And we aren't seeing it in practice. Right. And eventually, as we know, these just all become buzzwords that are thrown around. And so really, I wanted to cut across that jargon and get down to the fundamentals of which is kindness. And I think the irony of this is really that, as human beings, we are hardwired to be kind, right? We are raised to be kind. We raise our children to be kind. We, treat people the way we want to be treated. And somehow that all stops when we enter the world of work, and in particular, in relation to leadership. And so a book on leadership around kindness and leadership was a no-brainer for me. But the thing is, to kind of play on what you were saying, Ray, the people that we need to convince, right, kind of these these toxic managers that we all know, they're unlikely to pick up a book on kind leadership. And so the return on kindness, or the ROK, which is really a play on ROI, but showing really the hard line, kind of the tangible and intangible benefit of kindness, was kind of the thinking behind the title.
But you in the book say kindness is weak. Kindness doesn't get stuff done. Kindness is, it's rare. I mean, these are things that are happening out there.
Yeah, absolutely. So the book, really, the first part of the book really kind of unpacks what is kindness in leadership? What is it not, right? And what are the misperceptions? What are the myths around kindness in leadership? And it really debunks all of these kinds of myths, such as the fact that kindness is weakness.
I had early in my career, a CEO tell me, often the kindest person in the room is also the smartest person in the room. So we were rapidly growing, and I was like a first-time hiring manager. I was bringing on board lots and lots of folks, and I think he was gently reminding me that hire for attitude and we can train for aptitude. So he really wanted me to deliberately make sure the candidates that I was interviewing and welcoming to our company were not jerks. And I was like a hardcore electrical engineer, so I was doubling down on how smart you are. And if you could answer my super complex, mathematical oriented first principle questions, you were probably in. And I think maybe I was, leaning too much into aptitude. So can you, expand on what you were saying? What is kind leadership, and what is it not? Because we've got lots of executives, entrepreneurs, startup founders that watch the show, and I'm sure they're looking to onboard talent. So how do you detect authentic kind leadership? And how do you know that a person can actually be taught to be more kind? What are some of those levers that we can control when we're expanding our teams?
Yeah, I really like what you just said there because it's true. I mean, people are really trying to always, up their strengths or to gain new knowledge or to become an expert at something. But when you get to the level of leadership, especially when you get more senior, it's more about the people, right? It's less and less about technical aptitude because you can hire for that. You can stack your team with the best. So when you get to a position of leadership, your job is really about looking after the people. And that's why kindness becomes more and more important. So in the book, I define kind leadership as taking intentional action in service to and for the betterment of the people under your care. And it really is about kind of connecting with people human to human, right? But it's more than that because kindness is really, it's really a worldview, right? It's a way of engaging with the world. And that encompasses, all your core values around, empathy and compassion and humility and generosity. And when you think about leading with kindness, that's really around kind of leading with humanity, right? And importantly, kindness is a verb, right? Kindness is something that you have to see in action. Kindness is active. If you are, calling yourself a kind leader, but your people aren't seeing that in practice, there's a big disconnect there, right? And because kindness is manifested in action, the implication is, I think, encouragingly to your point, it's something that leaders can develop, right? They can practice it and they can train it. And then I just wanted to tie back to, some of these misperceptions around kindness in terms of what kindness is not. Probably the biggest perception around kind leadership is that a kind leader is a weak leader, right? That a kind leader doesn't drive results, that a kind leader is ineffective. And the implication of that would be that, this would be an undesired leadership approach for those who are wishing to project dominance and strength. But a key takeaway from the book is really around this distinction between kindness and niceness. And there is a distinction there, right? Because leading from nice, if you think about it, is someone who kind of gets caught up in the people-pleasing behaviors, right? That favor maybe more of the majority because they don't want to hurt people's feelings, right? They want to be everyone's friend. But that's damaging, especially when you're in a leadership capacity, because nice leaders don't make those tough calls or those tough decisions that's needed to get the job done. They don't hold those tough conversations that's needed, right? Because they want to keep the peace. So nice leaders are ineffective, but that's separate from being a kind leader. In the book, I unpack how kind leadership, far from being a weakness, is something that is personified by kindness and toughness, right? So what that really means is they're not mutually exclusive, kindness and toughness, right? Kindness does not mean that a leader, has to lower their standards of their people. You can still hold your people to, high expectations. You can still hold people accountable. You can still make tough calls. And in fact, with kindness, as the underpinning foundational factor, your people actually trust, right, that you're making decisions or your actions are in their best interests, right? So ultimately, you don't have to choose between, being an effective leader and being a good person.
Yeah, and you also say that. Yeah, and you also say that it's genderless. You also say that you can do kindness and toughness at the same time, and that's really surprising to a lot of folks in terms of being able to do that. Share with us a little bit of when you talk about how these behaviors are there. What can be done, right? What are practical behaviors for someone to get started? Let's say like someone is like, if they weren't a kind leader to begin with, they're like, ooh, I'm looking to be a kind leader. What do I need to do to get started and to make my way towards that journey?
Yeah, so the book outlines a framework. It's really easy to remember because it spells RISE, right? It's a RISE model. It's there to designed to help people rise to kind leadership. And the book goes into a lot more detail on this, but briefly, the R of RISE is about role modeling, right? So leaders cast a long shadow, right? Leaders should really be thinking about the example that they're setting. And of course, that's around, more major or more serious issues, such as how do you handle the exit of a colleague. But it's also about things like whether you're modeling the importance of switching off, right? Of prioritizing your own mental health and your own well-being. The I of RISE is about intentional flexibility, right? We see with all the recent changes to work design, we're still seeing companies trying to, experiment with, are we going to do more hybrid or more work from home or work from office? There's this ongoing conversation, but really it's a discussion. It should be a discussion about flexibility, right? It's acknowledging and appreciating, right, that each of your people are struggling with something different. Some are good at hiding it, right? But we are all struggling, and what we're struggling with is likely to change day to day. And flexibility isn't just in reference to kind of work scheduling, but really about, any needs that your people might have. And that crosses, mental health, it crosses diversity, inclusion, all of these issues, right, that we are really hearing front and center in the workplace. The S of RISE is about supportive action. So again, there's that action piece of kindness. And it's really, during these times of uncertainty, the role of a leader remains the same, which is to support your people, right? So it's about asking yourself, how can I help lighten the load? How can I, today minimize stressors for my people and make their lives easier? And when you think about it that way, leaders can really do so much here, right? There's emotional support, there's instrumental support, there's, it could be a small action, it could be, taking on a bigger fight, right, at the systems level. And then the E of RISE is really about energy. Why energy over any other emotions? Well, a leader's energy, first of all, communicates a lot, right? And leaders can set a negative tone or they can set a positive tone. It's that simple, really. And energy drives action. So it's how can you use that energy to uplift your people, right? And then equipping people is also an E. So leaders equip people by providing them with the tools that they need to get their work done. So there's a lot of applications to this framework, right? So it's easy to remember, it's RISE. It can be used in, senior management retreats. It can be used as, discussions at the middle management level, team-based meetings. And it's really there to help people to kind of actively apply and also practice incorporating kindness into their daily leadership. And there's so many other practical touch points in the book, exercises and activities, and also reflective questions that are great for, team development exercises.
That's really great. As you were sharing the RISE principles, I was inventorying some of my bosses in my career and trying to check off whether they're a kind leader. For the most part, they were all very demanding. Some were balanced, but for the most part, they were all demanding. But one thing I think about is they had the ones that I did put in the kind leadership category. They all had strong attunement. They were aware of and could respond to another person's needs, thoughts, feelings. They had strong attunement. So that's one thing that I think I find common with a couple of folks that I tagged as kind leaders in my head. The other part is that they didn't really flex their authority to get stuff done. It was kind of a delicious paradox. They would tone down their influence to get greater impact. And there were times where we would be in spirited discussions and they could just simply stop the whole thing and say, I'm the boss, this is how we're going to do it. But they didn't. They actually lowered their level of leadership and were able to get greater impact, which is kind of counterintuitive. But that's another thing I thought about when I inventoried kind leadership. As you interviewed all these amazing leaders for your book, can you give us examples of some interesting stories and folks that maybe demonstrated strong attunement, empathy, self-awareness, whatever the recipe is to make you a kind leader?
Yeah, that's a good question because and it's hard to answer because I had so many great, wonderfully inspired conversations with so many leaders around the world, right, representing so many different industries and functions, and also learning a lot from their own leadership experiences from all of these conversations. One memorable conversation was with Gary Ridge, CEO of WD-40. He has since stepped down from his role, but I'm sure you all know WD-40, right?
Sure.
That blue and yellow can with a little red cap, and you just spray it on squeaky doors, and it's
Every
magic.
house has WD-40. Yes.
Every house has
Ricketts company.
WD-40. That's right. Yeah. And this is, here's this company that's, they just sell oil in a can, right? You would never guess that their engagement scores globally, year after year, is above 90%.
Wow.
And you can read about our conversation in the book, but Gary really guided his company top down through kind leadership. And essentially, all that he talks about is really running the company, starting with a kind culture, and all of those benefits that he sees in, the objective data. That's the return on kindness, right? That's the ROK.
Wow. So no pun intended, but so it seems like kindness can be the business lubricant to increase flow of value and growth, and so that's awesome.
And I love that, and I'm going to use that from now on.
No, that's a great story. Go ahead, Ray. That's great. That's awesome. So you're mute, Ray.
There's some great stuff, when we think about the leaders that are doing this. But is there kind of a path to creating a kind company culture? Is there something people have to do differently to do that? And of course, right, these are things that probably start at the top. So.
Yeah, absolutely. So culture has to start from the top, right? It's intentionally designed. So in the book, I unpack, a 4-step process for doing this. Probably don't have time to go through it all, but essentially it starts by kind of making kindness a core company value. This is really the time to kind of hold company-wide discussions around how kindness might reflect a core company value, right? And what does that mean? It means working through, specific behaviors that's representative of what your company considers to be kind, and by extension, unkind, right? And then it's about actioning kindness, which means hiring for kindness, rewarding for kindness, and even, not rewarding unkind behaviors, because a key part of keeping a kind culture is protecting a kind culture, right? So if a kind culture is protected at all costs, that means even if you have a high performer who's unkind, then that's something you need to deal with, right? So when kindness is a core company value, and when you have leaders that role model kindness, and when kindness is rewarded, then kindness becomes contagious, really, right? So kindness becomes really the cultural norm. And I might also add here that, the energy that's invested into, promoting kind cultures is one that really pays dividends, right? The ROK, right? It's not just to the individual who demonstrates kind leadership. It's not just to those on the receiving end of kind leadership, but it's really to the entire culture and also to the broader community who kind of reaps shared value that's stemming from the actions of kind companies. And so really the implications here, there's so many, right? There are unlimited opportunities to kind of hold these discussions at, the board level, the senior management level, the middle management level, the employee level, because kindness really it's not a task to complete, right? It's not like one of those check it off the list things, because you're never finished being a kind leader, right? And then you can just, watch the impact of kindness scale out to become a culture of kindness within the organization.
Thank you, Dr. Cheng, for reminding us that in a world where you can be anything, be kind.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you so much. And by the way, I work with a real kind co-host for the last nearly 10 years. So I absolutely can vouch for the benefits of being around people who are kind. So thank you so much for the reminder.
Yeah, no, we're with Bonnie Hayden Chen, author of The Return on Kindness. Get your book on wherever books are sold. And of course, you can find it on Amazon. Thanks for being on the show, and thanks for staying up late with us.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Cheers. Thank you. Ray, what a privilege to have folks dialing in at 2 a.m. to share their nuggets of wisdom. Speaking of kindness, folks who have crypto portfolios are hoping for a kind next segment. But honesty above anything else. Andrew Chow, who's author of Cryptomania, Hype, Hope, and the Fall of FTX billion-dollar fintech empire, a book that just came out August 6th. This is fresh, hot off the press. For spirit of transparency, I own some crypto. I'm not going to talk about Ray or Andrew, but I own it.
I do too.
Okay, all right.
You gotta have skin in the game.
You gotta have skin in the game. Absolutely. Andrew is a correspondent for Time Magazine, who covers technology, culture, and business. My dad and I are Time customers. My father has been reading Time Magazine for over 40 years. And we still get hard copies of Time sent to our home every week.
That's very rare, so that's awesome to hear.
It's awesome. Both my dad and I, even though I have digital in my title, we still have some analog habits we can't shake. Andrew has written 5 Time cover stories. This may be outdated, but anyway, 5 Time cover stories, including the impact of AI corporate arms race and the president profile of Vitalik Buterin. A month before the 2022 crypto crash, Vitalik's a fascinating person. Man, I wish I was in a room while you were interviewing him. It's just fascinating. Andrew had previously written for New York Times, Pitchfork, and NBC News. Cryptomania is Andrew's first book. Welcome, and you can follow Andrew on X at Andrew R. Chow, CHOW. Welcome, Andrew, to DisrupTV.
It's awesome to be here. Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you.
Andrew, we're super excited, and I love the way you lay out the book. You lay all the main characters out, and you get the kind of like the protagonists are there. They get kind of the story behind them, and then you just jump in. And it's an amazing book. If anyone hasn't read it, you definitely want to get to understand what was going on in the background, and the way you set every character up is just brilliant. Your book has been described as a scrupulous postmortem of the 2022 crypto crash, but there's a lot more in it. Let's just get the overview for those of us who missed it. I don't know who that was, but I'm sure there are people who missed it, and explain to them like what really happened and how we even got to this point.
Yeah, so I definitely wanted to write a book that captured this pandemic era moment of crypto in all of its craziness, its urgency, its euphoria, its scams. I think most people, when they have either they have a polarized opinion about crypto. You have the skeptics who just equate it with that the whole thing is a scam, and then you have your Michael Saylors, who I saw is on your show, who think it's this revolutionary technology and it's going to change the world for the better, and maybe there's some bumps along the way, but it's only going to do good in the world. Both can be true, both can be false, and I wanted to show that how many different people there are, different types of people there are in crypto, of how big a tent of it is, and like why all these different people from around the world flocked into this big tent during this pandemic, this crazy pandemic moment. So I guess where do you want, how far back do you want me to start?
No, I mean, you layer them in. I mean, just even the first chapter with gas money to the $1 million man on the other end. I mean, it's just some great stories. I mean, everybody was jumping into this. It made the real estate crash look like nothing. So,
Yeah, so they were.
I mean, and what's the larger story that you're trying to convey? I mean, you know, Michael Saylor was on our show. He did influence, at least he influenced me in terms of thinking about store of value, not necessarily currency or fiat replacement, but more broader perspective on the power of it. I also reminded myself as a refugee, when my family and I had to abruptly leave, we left everything behind. I mean, to a point where my parents had to work 2 jobs 7 days a week for 20 years to try to scratch and claw our way back to normalcy. And if there was a way for us to transfer wealth, push a button, and be able to, you know, go across boundaries, I think about that. I think about what happened in Ukraine in the last couple of years, 5 million plus some odd folks that had my experience. You know, starting from scratch and not being able to have portability of wealth it can crush you. Most people can't recover from it. So anyway, I have my own little perspective on the power of, you know, distributed ledgers and blockchains. But what's the story? What was the big story that you wanted to convey in Cryptomania?
Yeah, absolutely. And I hear all of that. It's all amazing. So the book really starts with the idealism of crypto and sort of the elegant design and the problem that it's trying to solve. It comes out of the ashes of the 2008 financial crisis, and when there was a giant loss of trust in most institutions that we had, loss of trust in the banks, loss of trust in the government, loss of trust in, you know, how siloed the internet was becoming. And so there's the dream of Bitcoin and then later crypto, that we could sort of unearth ourselves and become more independent from all of these forces that were really bearing down and controlling most of our lives. The idea that you could have a decentralized form of money that, as you say, it can be portable and can be taken anywhere outside of governmental overreach. So I think the Ukraine part is, you know, something that I talk about in my book and is really important to think about. When Russia invaded Ukraine, crypto was one of the first ways that you could either get money in or out of the country because the banks were closed for several weeks. So it's sort of like in these times of major instability, major inflation, that crypto is presented as an alternative to, you know, a chaotic status quo, that it can be really powerful. So during the pandemic, obviously there's so much upheaval in so many ways in economics and culture and in government. And a lot of people flock to crypto because they're dissatisfied with what's going on in their lives or in their countries, and they see this beacon, and crypto is presenting itself as the solution to so many different problems. So I don't know if you guys were on Clubhouse at that time, and just listening to all the conversations about how blockchain was going to, in just like 2 years, 2 to 5 years, going to upend everything and become the new bedrock of the internet. I mean, the amount of optimism, maybe over optimism and euphoria that was specifically coming out of that time for, oh, you're going to have DAOs that are going to replace like corporations or governments. Yeah. Any city council just like vote on the blockchain, or, you know, like Citibank is going to be defunct, or, you know, we're all going to keep our money, you know, in hard wallets and all of these things. It was very easy for me and other people that really get swept away in some of these really lofty promises that the industry leaders were making. Again, this is across art, music, gaming was a big one, governments, you know, remittances, and then, you know, sort of tracing, you know, a lot of those promises and seeing these main characters like Sam Bankman-Fried and Kwon rise to the top of crypto, again, with these giant promises, but really building sort of Jenga towers of financial instability that set us all the way back to square one.
But let's start there, right? You talk about idealists versus degenerates, right? Lay out some of the degenerates and some of the idealists, because that framing of that battle for the soul is very, very important in this conversation.
I do sort of frame it, and maybe it's a tad simplistic, but I think it's a really good framing device of like the battle for crypto soul that happened over the pandemic and the ripple effects that we're still seeing now of how people are, who is at the center of crypto these days. So again, simplistic, but the book lays out this ideological battle between Sam Bankman-Fried and Vitalik Buterin. Vitalik Buterin being the main founder of Ethereum, who dreamed of using blockchain for so many uses beyond just money. So there are some people who just, love Bitcoin as a store of value. That's one thing. Vitalik wanted to use the beautiful structure of the blockchain to build, a fairer internet on top of it. That, as I said, you could reform the way that organizations were operated, or the way that art was. And he had all these. I mean, Vitalik is just like an amazing guy he's like a philosopher and an amazing technologist, and he has all these amazing ideas about how to wield crypto for good in the world. And on the other side, you have Sam Bankman-Fried, who did become the main character of last cycle, very unfortunately for crypto, because he was slapping his name on arenas and, Super Bowl commercials. He was at one point the richest 29-year-old in the world, as announced by Forbes. He had amassed a fortune of about $18 billion on paper, and was, probably, right, I don't know if you ran into him at CNBC or Bloomberg or any of those shows. He was on like every single day presenting himself as the sensible voice of crypto, when really I would say I call him as like the most degenerate gambler of that crypto era, in sort of like the risky games he was playing with money and derivatives. He really had very little ideological alignment with what crypto is supposed to be. Mostly he just cared about making a crap ton of money as fast as he could. And he was trying to do it for good, because he believed that the more money he could make, the more he could give it away to vetted causes. But he felt his job in this sort of system, this wheel for good, was just to make as much money as possible. And in order to do that, he needed to take out as many investments as possible, take as much risk as possible. And crypto was his vehicle for doing that. The phrase "number go up" is you hear that all the time in crypto, and Sam was sort of like the walking incarnation of number go up, but taking shortcuts for the number to go up. And he took a lot of shortcuts, and some of the other leaders also did, to build these very unstable, these unstable financial structures that then collapse spectacularly.
I love your term Jenga towers.
Andrew, you're a correspondent for one of the most trusted news source in the world, one of the oldest news source in the world. So there's tremendous responsibility in terms of capturing the grounded truth behind what happens in tech and business and culture. As you go through writing this book, as you go through researching and connecting the dots, how have you changed? What have you learned that you now apply to current stars that are standing on big arenas and big stages and advocating the future of technology, whether it's crypto or AI or whatever it may be, anything emerging, Web3, quantum computing, immersive experiences. There's still mega voices that are championing and are advocates of technology that are new to most of us. So how have you changed the way you craft stories and investigate and try to get to the ground of truth as a result of writing Cryptomania?
Absolutely. So I think one of the important things for me to study was actually not just this period, but the history of hype cycles that has happened for centuries. There's a great book called Devil Take the Hindmost by Edward Chancellor that I would recommend for anybody in finance. Yes. Okay. I'm glad you've read it. It's really amazing. And it really charts. So my book is called Cryptomania because of the mania aspect to this. Not saying that there's nothing at the heart of crypto, but that the way that the world came into it had this mania-like energy that we've seen over and over again. And the most famous mania maybe that people point to is tulip mania because of how sort of ridiculous it was in the Netherlands, where people were just started to speculate on tulip bulbs, some of which hadn't even come out of the ground yet. Obviously, there was this big bubble and it collapsed. But, you know, there have been so many manias over the years that have formed around legitimate technologies. Whether it be like the steam engine, there was like a giant bubble in
Oh
Britain
yeah,
that
the
formed
Victorian
around
real
that.
mania. There we go.
Exactly. And obviously the dot-com boom being one, another one. So sometimes there are bubbles that form around where there's just nothing inside at all, and it just is uniformly negative. And then sometimes the bubble ends up supercharging the underlying technology that's underneath it. So it's really hard to tell, like, when you're in it, which one it's going to be, because a lot of the rhetoric in a lot of these cycles is very similar. The hype, the euphoria, the optimism that this technology is going to change the world, that it's going to like lift, you know, the tide of rising all boats or whatever, that a butchering of that metaphor, and provide just like amazing wealth generation for the world. And a lot of the time, the manias, the rhetoric ends up not being true, and people, even the smartest people in the world, end up getting swept away in these manias. But then, as I just said, sometimes they lead to amazing things.
Sure.
So what I'm sort of like, you know, we're in a new cycle now, and I'm listening to the types of promises that leaders are making, not only in crypto and AI, and comparing them to the same promises that were being made in 2021 and 2018 and 2015. And I would say that I've gotten a lot more skeptical, honestly. You know, I know, you know, entrepreneurs don't want to hear that, but there's definitely, you know, certain language that, you know, VCs and entrepreneurs can use to sort of hypercharge these bubbles. And so I'm always sort of on the lookout for sort of how they're wielded and then what happens after.
And when somebody tells you that they're investing in crypto, let's say it's a family member, let's say it's a friend, let's say it's your parents, how do you guide folks when you hear that, you know, Andrew, I'm going to sell a few shares of stock, I'm going to buy Bitcoin or Ethereum or, you know, one of the thousands of coins that are there. Can you share what advice you give folks that are, and I'm not talking about investment advice, but just general high level advice. Do you tell them stop, go somewhere else, or is it more
no? So I mean, the first thing I'll say is just it's all about risk appetite.
Yeah.
You know, like if you have a healthy risk appetite, you like risk, then why not? You know, like please play around with it. I'm not going to discourage you. Just this is one of the most volatile assets that we have. There was a period, you know, during the period of my book, at least on the rise, Bitcoin was outperforming every asset on the stock, on the S&P 500.
Oh yeah.
But then it also, you know, its falls are just unprecedented. And like, you know, you talk about the biggest falls ever on Wall Street, like, you know, in like Black Monday, or it's, you know, the falls rival the worst days of Wall Street, and that's just, you know, once a year. So that's sort of what I tell people, is that it's risky. You know, you can look at charts 3 days, 6 months, 10 years, make your own conclusions. The other thing I want to say is to draw back in the conversation you were just having about aptitude versus attitude, and how that relates to this space. So there are going to be blockchain evangelists who only want to talk about the technological, like the aptitude of the blockchain, the technological piece of crypto and blockchain, and why it's more resilient than, like, you know, why it's digital gold, why it's more resilient than the dollar, and, you know, the technical underpinnings. And that's all good and well. You know, they could be right about that. But then we've seen how there's this other layer of crypto, of like the attitude about narrative, that is almost more important in the way that crypto goes up or down. And I think we're seeing that right now in the way that crypto, its community just rallies around these crypto moments, whether it be like Donald Trump talking about crypto, or what, you know,
it's now a political issue.
Yes.
It's whether it's taxes, gun control, the right to choose, and now it's if you had to make 10, at least in the conversations that I'm a part of, if I had to inventory 10 topics that are very divisive in this upcoming election next couple of months, I would say support for crypto is cracked the top 10. I think, and maybe because I'm in a technology space, so it probably have biased view, but it's now a political discussion. It really
Very much so.
very
And,
much.
the amount of money being pumped in to politics from crypto right now, I think, is flying a little bit under the radar. There's more corporate money flowing in from crypto to this election than any other industry. We're talking oil, banks. There's a major PAC called Fairshake that still has over $100 million to deploy on this election. So they're spreading it around to different races and trying to get pro-crypto candidates into office on both the Democrat and the Republican side. And it's just an insane amount of money. So it's still, yeah.
Let's get back to the genesis of the book, right? It's 2022. The three horsemen have fallen. Describe the three horsemen. People are left in a collapse. NFTs are worth crap. What's going on?
It really hurt. It really hurt the NFT community. Oh my God. Yeah. Big.
Yeah. So some of my main characters are NFT artists because I've written a lot about culture and the ways that technology impacts culture. There was this big dream during the pandemic that NFTs were going to sort of unlock this new era of global art, global digital art, that it was going to enable, artists from Africa and South America and Asia to display their work and sell their work in ways that they'd never had before. And for a while, it became true. There were all these amazing communities and artists that shot to sort of semi-fame from around the world. One of my main characters, his name is Owo from Nigeria. He has an amazing story of, coming from a small village, starting with sort of like hand carvings and then like becoming this amazing digital artist, becoming a millionaire, and then like having a lot of it sort of evaporate. You'll have to read the book to get his full story. I'm still rooting for Owo. He's an amazing artist. So in 2022, sorry?
The tease.
Yes.
It is a great story. It is a great story. We'll give it to that.
So there's this giant bubble that forms, and then in 2022, there are these macroeconomic forces that weigh upon crypto. So, people argue that crypto is supposed to be this amazing hedge against inflation or everything else that's going on in the world. In 2022, we find that's not true because after Russia invades Ukraine, the supply chains are upended. And there's this rampant inflation also because of the pandemic and the stimulus checks. And interest rates go up for the first time in years. And because people are using crypto as a speculative asset, mostly they're just using it to gamble. Most of the people who come in during this era don't really care about the fundamentals. They see number going up. They see people like Sam making a boatload of money and they're coming in. But when interest rates come up, it's a risky asset to have. So they jettison it and it starts going down. And that's compounded by these really risky actors who amass a lot of Twitter clout and money. And we're talking Kwon. He created a product called Terra Luna that was just very risky. And he promised a 20% payout for anybody who parked their money in the specific asset, which was just totally unsustainable. You have this guy named Su Zhu, who was... Yes. Su Zhu was Three Arrows Capital, and he was borrowing a ton of money in order to make all sorts of risky investments. Then you have Alex Mashinsky, who is running what he called like the safest crypto bank in the world, but also playing risky games with it. And all of this, and then Sam Bankman-Fried was the last horseman of the crypto apocalypse, as I call them. They were all sort of stacking these really risky games on top of each other, like sort of in the cyclical pool of money, and also using, like derivatives and futures to sometimes bet on money they didn't have. And this comes back to haunt Sam, where he gets in a giant hole of billions of dollars and he doesn't have it. So then he uses his customers' money from FTX to pay back some of the debts without telling anybody. And this is what ultimately lands him in jail for the next 25 years.
Yeah, unbelievable.
How does CZ fit into all this?
CZ, I mean, it's funny. Yeah, I mean, CZ was the biggest crypto whale for a long time. I mean, he might still be, but he was slapped with similar accusations as Sam was, and forced to sort of relinquish power in Binance. The one thing I'll say about Binance and FTX was the whole point of crypto at the beginning was there's a phrase called "not your keys, not your wallet," which basically just means we don't want to trust middlemen with our money. And the whole beauty of crypto is supposed to be that there were no intermediaries, and you had this digital money that, as you said, Vala, you could bring across borders and cash out anywhere you wanted, that the government couldn't do anything about it. But it was really hard to buy and sell Bitcoin without any infrastructure. So these middlemen, these exchanges, sort of filled this need and then became some of the biggest players of the ecosystem. So by that way, you're just replicating the system that you'd hope to overturn of the middlemen, creating new middlemen who are even less regulated, and they're playing way riskier games with your money. That was obviously the case with Sam. And Binance, I don't want to butcher this, but at some point, like 40% of all crypto was inside of Binance, which is just like completely against the central tenets of what crypto in its decentralization is supposed to be.
Why would you need a bank in a crypto world? Just kidding.
So Andrew, take us to current state. What's the current state of crypto today?
So the price has rebounded mostly. It's all time. It did. Bitcoin hit its all-time high of around 70,000 this year. And some of the regulatory guardrails are coming down a little bit in the US. The primary thing that happened was a Bitcoin ETF was approved. So that allows, your regular investors to, buy this instrument that follows Bitcoin. You're not actually holding Bitcoin, but you're holding a facsimile of Bitcoin, which again is like a Bitcoin middleman. But most people just are hoping that the store of value is going to continue to increase. And the one thing I'll say that's different about this cycle than the last one is how utopian and how big of the promises in so many different industries crypto had, again, in like art, in gaming, and in DAOs, and all these things, all these weird little experiments of like decentralized experiments where people around the world were like forging these weird projects that I wrote about, like carbon credits and all these crazy things that like just slap a blockchain on there and it's going to make it better. Most of those,
there's an NGO behind every one of these.
Yeah.
There's some family office fund that's working on this.
Yes. A lot of these projects did not live up to their expectations of either their investors or the founders.
Right.
And I think a lot of the energy, at least of what we see in the mainstream, is just, a lot more boring. It's Andreessen Horowitz, and it's it's in the banks of like, well, we think Bitcoin is a good store of value and that it'll continue to go up.
Andrew, times have changed. Andreessen Horowitz is boring. Oh my God, it's so true.
Yeah. But you still have ARK Invest, you still have Kathy Wood and ARK Invest talking about projections of $1 million per Bitcoin, just the scarcity, the volume. Today, if every millionaire wanted to have one Bitcoin, they couldn't because there's not enough to go around. So there's still, and of course, this election, I think, will play a role in the narrative, and it'll also play a role in the price fluctuations we'll see from now until November 5th and shortly thereafter. Are we going to see a spike?
The hope is not extinguished at all. There's still so much hope. And if you were to ask me, not being financial advice, I think it has a ways more up to go. I just think it also has a ways more down to go. I don't know where it's going to end.
But Andrew,
this roller coaster.
In your book, while you were writing your book, we saw 69 to 17. I mean, it was a massive drop. Will we see 17 again? I don't know. It would have to be four new horsemen and something really that challenges the whole thesis behind
Andrew,
it.
Andrew, have you seen that the market has changed? I mean, we see Dubai now being the capital of crypto, and the rules and the regulation the UAE has put into place has changed it. The golden visas that are allowing US citizens to be able to invest in banks without a FATCA check. Well, I mean, there's a lot happening in Dubai. I mean, I'm going to be there on the 10th and 11th and 12th in the region. And I mean, I have 32 meetings set up with folks that are just crypto startups, because there seems to be that seems to be the center of the universe now. I mean, where do you see this?
It's not Miami. It's not Miami.
It's not Miami. And do you think Trump will bring it back? I mean, he just made a campaign promise to say we're going to make U.S. the crypto capital of the world again. I mean, where do you see that? Like, put on your prognosticator hat.
Right, 32 meetings. That's
and he promised
32 meetings is insane, right? That's crazy.
It is. That's unbelievable. Ray, you got to summarize all of this and keep us in the loop. Don't have these meetings, in the dark. I'm super interested in that.
There's a lot going on.
Wow.
There is a lot going on. There's so many builders that are still building in the space, and there's a lot of hope that there's this sort of regeneration in Asia right now that's going to pick up the torch. We'll see. I mean, I think there is a lot of promise there. I think that based on the last few months and sort of tracking the US news and how that impacts crypto prices, it's still, there are so many investors that it's still a sort of US based vision, I would say. If, given how Trump's assassination attempt impacted, crypto's price, and then there was that mini shock that started with the Japanese yen carry trade, and like crypto still dipped 20% in a single day. Like that's not supposed to happen to a mature, asset. So, that's all I can say is, the building is not stopping. A lot of it is happening in Asia, and the roller coaster is going to continue. I would just say, we saw what happened last time when corners were cut in favor of adoption, and how that can really debilitate the space. So I think it's really important to build prudently.
Yeah, for sure. I'm going to make a prediction here. Andrew's next Time Magazine cover story might have something to do with crypto. Given his book is going to be a short bestseller. So that's awesome.
Oh, he's going to talk about the AI robber barons.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That would be freaking awesome. No, we're here with Andrew Chow, the author of Cryptomania, Hype, Hope, and the Fall of FTX's billion-dollar fintech empire. You can follow him on X at Andrew R. Chow. And of course, an amazing book. Definitely get it. It is going to be one of those books that MBA classes will be on every single MBA reading list. So thanks a lot.
Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you so much, guys.
Cheers. What a big brain.
Oh, we got to catch up with him in the green room. That's awesome.
Yeah, no, it's what a great job. I mean, and again, you're writing for one of the most respected publications on earth. So the pressure of deeply investigating, getting the story correct, and guiding readers to how to better think about. Ultimately, I think the lesson is when you read Andrew's book, it's just be a better, more critical thinker. Like, do a little bit of research on your own. Like, talk to people and don't assume things just because the loudest voice is corrupting the signal to noise ratio when it comes to the hope and hype of these emerging new technologies. Ray, do us a favor, 30 seconds. I know you're standing outside of an airport. Summarize your learnings of the last hour.
Check your Coinbase wallet. No, I'm just kidding. Hey, we started off with a really interesting topic, really about the return on kindness. And what Dr. Bonnie Chang was really talking about was the fact that there is a different way to lead. Some leaders have it, some leaders don't. We can learn it. It's a leadership practice that you can definitely get to. And there are new company cultures that you can deliver on. And of course, we then talked about what's happening with the world of crypto, right? Like the tulip bubble, like the steam engine bubble, like the last internet bubble, right? What happened with crypto? And I think there's a lot of lessons learned, especially as we get to new disruptive technologies, exponential technologies, and what that means for society. There's always the next big thing. There's always the next big hype cycle. And I think what he did a really good job was talk about the players, the breadth, the depth, right? What happened, right? How did we get to this situation? And of course, what did we learn? Right. And I think like all good human stories, we never learn from history, but we just write better history. So here's where we are at the moment, and it's pretty amazing. It's definitely, these two books are something to get, whether you're on the leadership side or we're trying to figure out where technology is heading. So
yeah, perhaps if the crypto leaders display a bit more kindness, they could not drift away from core values and guiding principles and continue to earn trust. So I think that intersection is clear to all of us. Next week, Disrupt will be off. We'll be back on September 13th, and that's episode 375. Elias Simpson, former CEO of Modi VCare, will be here. Larry Dignan, one of the greatest editor-in-chief and writers in the tech space, he's editor-in-chief at Constellation Research, will be here. Can't wait to connect with Larry. And Jeremy Kwon, author of Mastering AI, the survival guide to our superpowered future, and AI editor of Fortune magazine. So we've got lots of editors-in-chiefs in 2 weeks on our show, and they will help.
25. Yeah, we are 25 episodes away from 400.
400. It's 400, and again, we're inching our way to 1,500 guests, which we're one of the longest running podcasts, certainly technology podcasts. Thank you for our network. Thank you for our viewers. Thank you for those of you who take the time to recommend guests to Ray and I on LinkedIn and X. Please continue to recommend guests. Please continue to recommend best-selling authors and entrepreneurs and business leaders. Frankly, anyone who's putting a dent in the universe can earn the right to come and share his or her story here on Disrupt. If it's Friday, it's Disrupt TV. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you in 2 weeks. Bye, everyone.